All right, we are live. Live as live can be. Let's see this. And here we go. It's working on Instagram. And we're working on Facebook. Perfect. Keep an eye on here. Hey, look, we got Cody Shaver in the car.
Cody.
Little vacation here.
Yeah. Where are you headed today?
Right now we're in Oregon, heading to Washington.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we can't hear you super well. I'm not sure if there's a microphone on your thing that you can hold up a little closer. Oh, it doesn't. It seems like we're not. I don't know if you have Bluetooth on. It seems like we're not coming in through that microphone.
How about
coming in through some other microphone.
How about now?
What's that? Much
How about
better.
now?
There you go.
Okay.
Yep, that's better.
We're good.
Good. I'm surprised you didn't invite us on the vacation this time.
I gotta come see my mama. She's up here.
Nice.
Yeah. Gotta see the mom. Vicky's nice enough to be driving today.
Nice. Well,
Yeah.
we're glad she's sharing you with us for this little hour, or
Yeah.
however long we talk about some of this stuff. So I'm finishing redacting a couple documents right now, just so we can talk through. Typically, it's like the morning of this, we meet as a team, and we'll kind of talk about, what's been happening, what's bothering us this week, what's bothering homeowners this week that are going through tugboat issues, and it kind of organically seems like there's a theme each week that comes out for us. And this week, it was an old one that we haven't talked about in a while, but is something we've talked about quite a bit, which is just adjusters and what their role is, how they see their role, and what I don't know what their obligations are. So actually, Cody, I'll kind of throw it to you for a second here while we have you, and because you were, correct me if I'm wrong, but you still are a licensed contractor. You were an independent adjuster at one point. You had another role within insurance as well. I can't remember if you sold policies or something like that, but and then you were.
Go ahead.
I was saying you were a public adjuster as well, and then now you're an attorney, right? So you've gotten to stand in the shoes of a lot of different insurance roles. My question to you is, because I'm curious for you, when you stepped into the role as an independent adjuster, right, as an adjuster representing the insurance company, one, what kind of training did you receive as to what is your role? Like, what is your obligation? Who are you serving? How are you serving them? And kind of what are you doing within the claims process? I'm curious what your training was as you were brought up in that world.
I zero. My training was zero. I had no training. Literally no training. I was handed a clipboard and a tape measure. We didn't even have laser tapes back then. It was a tape measure and a sample estimate, and told to go out. I was fortunate enough that my mother was a state manager for an insurance company. My brother was an adjuster. He was an independent as well for a while. My father was a insurance restoration contractor. So I grew up kind of around it all. So I kind of had an idea. But as far as what my role was, what my duties were, it was kind of just from my mother telling me, she didn't, it's kind of odd. She didn't want me to embarrass her. She'd been in the industry for like 30 years at that time. And she was so afraid that I was going to embarrass her. So she would make me study policies all the time. And, 18, 20 years old, knowing that I was probably going to go in the industry, because I was a receptionist actually in college for an insurance company, my first insurance job, and worked my way up. But she was so afraid that I was going to embarrass her. So she used to quiz me all the time. And I'd come home every weekend because I was homesick. I was a mama's boy. So she would go over policies with me. And other than that, but I got no formal training. But, back in the day when my mother was a trainer for some larger insurance companies, a few of them, and her she had a common theme. You do whatever you can to find coverage. You walk into every claim believing that there's coverage until the facts prove you wrong. And that's how I was trained to look at losses. And that's how, when I got into the industry of adjusting claims, when I got my promotion away from the telephone as a receptionist for an insurance company, that's the way that other adjusters used to handle claims. You hear people say, well, I treat every claim as if it's my own or if it was my mother's. And some of these people must not like their mothers, I can tell you, because, they're looking. But, if you just go on to the premise that every claim is covered until the facts prove you wrong, and as it relates to the language in the policy, the exclusions, then a lot of the old timers, I'm going to say old timers because I guess I'm one of them now. I started in the industry insurance industry at 18, at 50. I'm big 5-0 now. I think that you'll hear that every once in a while still, but you don't hear that anymore. As a matter of fact, you don't really get to have conversations with adjusters at that level anymore. It's not the same as it used to be. You used to have a rapport with these adjusters, and you see them all the time, and you talk about things. And I used to get calls from insurance adjusters all the time, even as a public adjuster or in law school or working as a contractor. I'd get calls from adjusters that would say, hey, my manager's saying this, but I understood it this way. And we'd have conversations about it. You just don't see it anymore. And I think it's not the individual adjuster's issue. I think is that it's just corporate policy of how to where they don't really have the authority to make decisions anymore. Everything goes through management. That's my belief. But before I go off on a tangent, I'll stop there.
Yeah, when I was talking about it earlier, and I think Aaron would say the same thing because we came up around the same time. He was a couple years after I did, and he got to shadow somebody longer than I did. But what I was talking about earlier is, even the little bit of training that I did get was almost exclusively about estimating, right? This is how you would estimate for something. And then beyond that, this is how you read the guidelines that the insurance company sent you on how they want you to estimate or look at things for this claim. And then beyond that, if I had any policy training, it was, here are the few endorsements or bits of language that we want you to think about in these specific scenarios. And it was very exclusive to those bits of language. And so it was in those tiers, and not those are all fine and should be included in training and should be expanded, obviously. But what was missing entirely from it, and I feel like it took me forever to realize, even into becoming a public adjuster, was understanding what is my role here? What am I ultimately trying to do? So what you were saying earlier, never walking into a claim thinking that my job was to find coverage or anything like that. I was told what was covered and what wasn't. And if it didn't check a box really quickly for what was covered, or it checked some other box, then it wasn't. But beyond, and I'm not receiving that training as to what my role is, what's the dynamic between you and an insured. I think I was a fine adjuster and even a good adjuster at times. Rachel was a staff adjuster for an independent adjuster. And I think she was a great adjuster in the experiences that I've talked about and how she viewed claims. But I think for Rachel and other ones like that, more and more that has to do with, hey, what kind of person are you and how much patience do you have and how are you viewing yourself within this claims process? Because if you're not trained in the soft skills of, hey, how do you communicate with someone? How do you talk through and find coverage? What's your role here? This isn't your money that you're paying to them. Then what develops is, I think, a lot of bitterness from some adjusters, frustration because the process isn't easy. They're overwhelmed. And the way that comes out is increasingly surprising and completely inappropriate. That was what the start of some of this conversation was today for us. I'll just give you a couple of anecdotes. One, this was from a public adjuster that works with Waypoint, and they were on an inspection this week, and the independent adjuster that showed up started the inspection because it had to be rescheduled one time because that public adjuster had something come up. And it wasn't like she didn't show up for an inspection. She had to reschedule one before it happened anyways. And the independent adjuster started the inspection screaming at her, aggressively yelling at her. and thankfully there was someone else there. There was a witness to it. It's completely inappropriate. Then like started apologizing and then started using this line, which is not unique to this adjuster because we've heard it a lot, which was, you know what, I don't have to approve that, but I'm going to. And that it's this sentiment that we've seen a lot from adjusters, and we see, especially from the exposure with at Tugboat, we see it said to homeowners all the time, where the sentiment from the adjuster is essentially, I'm going to go ahead and do you a favor by paying for this for you. And this completely inappropriate dynamic where, one, you're not doing anybody any favors within a claim. You either owe them money because of the contract or you don't. Maybe there's a little bit of gray area, but if you decide that you owe them money, it's not a favor, it's a contract, and they've been paying you premiums for it. And two, it's not your money, so you're never doing them a favor by doing it. And you should never take it personally, whether or not that you're paying that money. But that sentiment is one, it's not ubiquitous, it's not every adjuster, but it's way more often than it should be. I would say we see it really often on the especially on Tugboat side, where adjusters are interacting with homeowners, and we get some exposure to that.
Yeah, we had one recently. I shared this with you too before. I think maybe even Cody heard this. A guy adjuster says, I really went above and beyond because I had family affected by the fire too. And you're just like, well, thanks. I mean, I guess I'm glad I'm not in Arkansas and not, maybe I'm glad I'm in I don't know how to respond to that. It's like, that's not a thank you or you're welcome or anything. That's nothing. It's horrible, actually.
Wow. Well, you know, something you said, Cameron, about, you know, the same thing that Rachel was saying is we're going to go above and beyond, or I don't have to approve that. You know, I was an independent for a couple different firms. You people were independent. None of us were trained that way and told that, you know, to sell it and sell them on things, you know, make them seem like they're getting a deal, right? It's a sales ploy, right? I don't have to throw in the undercoat, but I'm going to, right, for free. So that's all you're doing is kind of a sales point. I wasn't trained that way, and I know you guys weren't. So I don't understand, you know, if it's just camaraderie in the industry where adjusters are talking and say, hey, say this and say that. But, you know, this whole, I don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it for you. Reminds me of years ago, I had a potential client, and I said, well, meet with the adjuster, see what they're going to say to you, and then give me a call. So she called me afterwards and says, oh, he was great. And I said, she goes, he's going above and beyond. And so like Rachel brought it up, it kind of sparked my interest. And I said, oh, really? What is he doing? And she goes, well, he's not just going to paint the affected wall. He's going to paint all the walls in my room. And he said he didn't have to, but because he knew that I was older, he's going to allow some hours for someone to come in and clean up afterwards. And I thought, wow, so he did a good job by giving you stuff you're legally entitled to and making it seem like a deal. Wow, that's great. You know, I'm going to sell you this car, and guess what? I'm going to throw wheels in it and a steering wheel.
Right.
So it just makes me laugh, but it works, right? It works that people honestly think that they're getting a deal, or they have an adjuster that's going above and beyond. You know, if you have an adjuster saying they're going above and beyond, that file is going to be audited. And is that auditor going to go above and beyond as well? Or is the adjuster just giving you what you're entitled to and making it seem like he's going above and beyond, either to make himself feel better or to make you feel better as a client? But is that, you know, especially if it's independent, I don't know about you, Cameron, but when you were an independent, someone within the independent firm would review it first, right? They would do an audit.
Every time. And
then it goes to the carrier, and then they do an audit. So you could write a $50,000. I'm going to go above and beyond because my family was affected by the fire, and I'm going to give you everything, and I can. And then it gets audited by my company, and they cut it from 100,000 to 70, and then the carrier audits it and drops it down to 40, and so it really doesn't matter, right? I mean, he doesn't have to. He or she, that adjuster, has no control over the auditors. So what does that mean that I went above and beyond? You know, you can go above and beyond in every file and give them brand new houses and a shiny new car. But as soon as he gets audited, it's going to get kicked out because it doesn't go within the guidelines. And that's something that I was having a discussion. I'm not going to go off tangent, Cameron. I know I do that a lot. But a discussion with a contractor the other day, because we're talking about auditing, right? He was saying that, well, the carrier won't allow me to put that. And I'm thinking, how did we get into an industry or become in a place in an industry where the clients are telling the experts how to write up their reports. It just boggles my mind completely. And that's kind of what the auditors are doing. You have an adjuster that goes out to a property and writes up what they feel is needed, and then an auditor who's never seen the property audits it, cuts it down. So anyways, so you're right. What is the role of an adjuster today? That's today's topic. What is their role? Really, it's just to take photos so that the auditor can review them and to make a decision, right? That's what
that's functionally what their role is, except for the one thing that Rachel and I were talking about right before we hopped on, is that insurance companies oftentimes use the tools that they have at their disposal, meaning that an independent adjuster at times can be communicated as like, well, we just sent them out to take photos, right? They were just there to take photos. Their opinion doesn't matter. And that sentiment is often shared if the homeowner's like, no, when the adjuster was here, he told me it didn't look like the leak was going on that long. He agreed with me, right? And so that a homeowner might say that to the desk adjuster, and the desk adjuster might respond and say, no, he's just there to take photos. He's just there to document things for us. Really, we're the ones that review it and get it. So in that instance, they're holding the adjuster at a very long arm's length, or the field adjuster, the independent adjuster, and saying like his opinion doesn't matter. He's just a camera with legs that walks in and takes some photos. And but then in another instance where call it the homeowner is saying, you know what, I like to fix things, and I want to do this bathroom myself, and it doesn't make sense how much you paid, or I have a contractor and his estimate's this much and he's disagreeing. They'll often lean on an independent adjuster and say, you know what, we had our claims expert out there. He wrote every single thing that he saw. We did a full investigation and sent out someone appropriate. So we're going to need something more from you because we have this thorough opinion and documentation from our expert that was on site. And in that instance, suddenly he's not just a camera with legs. He has a brain and he's a genius when it comes to construction. And it's the same person. And I like that is something I know was happening when I was an independent adjuster, because I could get treated either way within a claim, right? And it's sometimes, to your point earlier, Cody, it's not that these adjusters or field adjusters might be thinking nefariously at any point about this. Sometimes it's just easier, right? I don't want to assign another contractor. And so like you just say the easy thing, because claims aren't easy for adjusters. We recently heard that State Farm's large loss adjusters are handling as many as 100 claims right now. At a time. How? Exactly. So the point is like the easy way out is to say, no, we already sent somebody. We don't have time for another inspection. We already sent somebody, even though that somebody was a camera with legs, right? According to your guidelines or whatever it might be. So, yeah, I think oftentimes they're not trained to say any of this, and that was my point earlier as a team when we were discussing it, is when you receive no training, oftentimes someone will just settle into however the role shapes them. And if you're shaped by the frustrations of a storm, call it, thousands of wildfire claims in California and all the stress that's there, and the pressures of your independent adjusting firm trying to get more claims, and your auditors on that end saying that you're using the wrong line items, and then having to re-inspect because you didn't get, like everything that piles up, that adjuster that shows up to the inspection I was talking about earlier and is screaming at someone because it got rescheduled. No, I'm not trying to give them any grace, but I'm saying he probably never received any training on how do you deal with frustrations, how do you communicate with someone when there's a dispute, what's your role within this process. He was just given a bunch of claims because I was just given a bunch of claims, right? That's how my first storm, I had to settle my first 100 claims in my first 30 days. Like I showed up in Houston and I didn't know what Xactimate was. I didn't even have a login, and I had already had 30 claims in my inbox. And by the time I left, I had 100. So.
and back then Xactimate probably didn't have pictures you can click on and go, oh, that's a truss. Oh, that's a purlin. Oh, that's a, and you just kind of get a book and try and say, well, that looks good. That looks like something that should be in this estimate. I'm going to put that in there, you know. That's how you got trained on those forms,
Cody,
right?
I'm not that old. I think Xactimate had the photos, but I still had to click on them.
When I started, when I started, they didn't even have the Xactimate, so I guess I am that old. So,
Aaron, when you were training real fast, because you started with the same firm I was at, or was it a different one? Was there any training other than estimating for you?
Well, excuse me. Yeah, and a lot of it's carrier specific. So like different carriers would have like ethics trainings that they wanted you to go through, or conflict resolution training. So a lot of that's at the carrier level. The IA firms had some of it, so there is some of that.
Yeah, I don't remember going through any of it.
The extent of my training from a coworker when I was an independent was, when a insured's telling you, just agree with them and talk to them and be open, and let them know that you can't make any decisions yet, that you can't, you have to review everything, and don't ever tell anyone. This was the main thing. Don't ever tell an insured that their claim is denied while you're at their location. Just tell them that you're going to review everything and that you'll be in touch. That was the extent of any training, and that was just from a coworker who happened to be my brother, was telling me, hey, to save you a lot of headache, do this, But no, I never got a training. I worked for a really small company, though, and I will say one thing, that I was the only one there that had a contractor's license, and I was red tagged and on my files more than anyone, being told what does and doesn't need to be included. And one of the things that got me away from that side, because I don't think any of us here to bash insurance companies. A lot of them are great, and like I always say, an insurance company is only as good as the adjuster that they send out, right? But one of the things they were saying is, I'd say, well, masking is required. And they go, yeah, but the contractor reviewing the estimate doesn't know that it's not included. So unless they ask for it, we don't put it. And I thought, well, doesn't sound right. But, hey, someone told me about a public adjuster. I go, what's that? Let's try that thing out. So here I am. This is what I've been doing ever since. But, I'm just saying that was just kind of, I worked for a very small company. That's the kind of things that they said. I'm not saying that every company does it. I'm not saying every adjuster is bad. But I will say overall, from, me speaking with people, there is no more training. And if there is a training, it's usually done through a portal, one of those online portals, right? So really, what is it? Back in the day of working in a claims office, we used to call it prairie dog. When you'd stand up and say, hey, I got a question. I got an old roof that looks like this, and someone would pop up and say, oh, it's this kind of roof, use this line item. You don't have that benefit anymore. So I think you're right, Cameron. I think adjusters are just getting frustrated because they don't have the help that they need, because most of the help came from working in a BCO, right? A branch claims office, and you're with your coworkers who had ran into the issue. I know they have instant message and stuff like that, but I think that's a lot of it. The lack of training, in part of the conflict resolution, you are kind of trained to say, or to understand, that when you start losing an argument, that's when you start getting mad. Nobody's getting mad when they're winning an argument, unless the other side's not listening.
Absolutely. Well, Cody, I'm going to upload a picture real fast, actually a screenshot of something I found online earlier, and then Rachel, we can go over some of your stuff too. I'm going to upload a screenshot of something that was posted in a Facebook group of adjusters. So, oh wow, it does not want to show the whole thing here. Let me see if I can get it to change the size of it here. There we go. Okay. Is Cody gone? I can't tell.
Yes.
Oh, he bounced off here. All right. Well, I'll read it for us. I can read it for him when he comes back. So someone posted this as a question as to what they should do.
Sorry about that.
All right. No worries, Cody. I'm going to read you this. This was posted in an adjuster group online. And I don't know if it's a group that has adjusters and roofers and different people involved with claims. And so I don't know if it was a roofer or an adjuster or who it was. And so the question, they posted this screenshot of a letter from Nationwide. It says, yes, you are correct. The shingles do have to be attached to a nailable surface. But in this case, sheathing would be his responsibility. That's the insured. The member does not have ordinance and law coverage, but this is a coverage issue. The sheathing, sorry, the member does have court ordinance and law, but this is a coverage issue. The sheathing is clearly rotted and not covered per the partial denial I have sent. This is a coverage issue and does not qualify for appraisal. So they were trying to invoke appraisal over this issue. I have included my manager on this and on this estimate as well. So essentially, the roofer is saying, hey, we have to replace some sheathing because there's no nailable surface for these shingles. And the adjuster is saying, well, that's not covered. It's wear and tear if the wood is rotten or if the wood's just not nailable because it's old. And even though you have ordinance and law coverage, and I read a little bit more, like the city had come out and inspected and said, you cannot nail to this surface in these areas. And they had tagged which portions needed to be replaced. So first, I want to see your thoughts, and then I'm gonna post a screenshot after this of one of the responses from someone who I saw in there was an experienced adjuster with the largest independent adjusting firm that there is. So, what are your thoughts on this, Cody?
First of all, wear and tear isn't the cause of loss. So we're not even
Ooh,
talking about
your sound's coming in weird again. I think you need to change whatever we did last time.
How's that?
Much better.
Okay. Well, first of all, the cause of loss isn't wear and tear, right? So we shouldn't even be talking about wear and tear. We're talking about a pre-existing condition, right, that it was insured upon. And this isn't California. This is a California case.
I don't think this was California.
It's like Texas.
Did you find it, Rachel?
It's in the top left, I think, above the nationwide. Let's say Texas.
Yes, it looks like it does. Texas. Well, while Cody's gone, our favorite friend Emily Bush posted a question here. You can see what that is. Oh, Cody's back already, I think. Maybe. You never know.
Yeah,
All right, Cody, you're gonna have to fix your sound probably as you come back, but what are your thoughts here?
I did.
Oh, you're good.
I did. Okay.
Your sound's
Sorry.
good.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. Well, first of all, you guys heard me that it's not a wear and tear issue; it's a pre-existing condition that they accepted liability in that condition, and this is a California case, right?
I think it's Texas.
All right. Well, I can only speak to California, but in California, the code is very clear, and we can't. It's very simple, right? You have to provide a contractor that can do the work. They have to do the work. They would owe to replace that because you cannot affect the repairs that were covered without addressing the rotted material. And again, the rotted material or the deteriorated sheathing isn't a cause of loss, but it's required in order to complete the repairs. I mean, we have a huge case that we're dealing right now, exact same thing. It's going to trial. They're resting their hat on this pre-existing condition. There's actually a case on it as far back as 1930s that says that you can't negate coverage based upon a pre-existing condition, infirm condition, when a covered peril is the efficient proximate cause. So that's what we're dealing with in California. The efficient proximate cause would be whatever the peril is, right? I'm assuming it's wind. So they have to do that. And actually had dealt with the issue with a state insurance commissioner staff that called me, and they were kind of saying the same thing. And there was a sheathing issue, and what happened was you couldn't replace the roof without replacing the sheathing. I said, well, but the code says you have to provide someone that can do the work per good workmanship like standards. The only way to achieve that is to replace your sheathing. So that Department of Insurance says, okay, we agree with you, but the top plate's damaged, so now we have to rip down the walls. I'm like, we need to get back to an insurance place in this world where they actually go out and inspect these homes prior to insuring them, so this doesn't happen. They don't want to do that, so they just want to use a pre-existing condition as a basis to deny the claim. So they're essentially denying it because you can't get the work done. That's my opinion. So
yeah, and it's funny because that is an opinion that was consistent with some of the independent adjusting firms and carriers I worked with where this was pretty clear. I mean, even for you, Aaron, right? Like if sheathing was rotten and there was no nailable surface, if the sheathing was rotten under a shower, right, and there needed to be some framing repairs to put the shower back together, even though it had nothing to do with the loss. Like, yeah, I'm gonna put some framing in here because obviously, like, you can't put a shower back here. Like, it was just a given, right? And it seems like more and more this use of wear and tear as a means of post-claims underwriting is becoming, I don't know, somewhat ubiquitous across carriers, it seems like.
It's almost like they're binding these policies in the same way these adjusters are talking. Like, well, we don't have to do this, but we are. So here you go.
We don't have to insure. We are.
Yeah. But in turn, we're going to deny it later because it's just wear and tear. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But here's what's concerning on that, Cameron, if you can hear me. What's concerning is I had a claim. It was a smoke claim up in Altadena. And there, of course, we had winds as well. And one of the shingles were torn off. And the desk adjuster and the field adjuster were on board on the same class. They were both trained the same day. And the inside adjuster saying, "Oh, I love that guy. You're in good hands." And I'm thinking, well, I named this guy in a lawsuit, so I don't know how good those hands are. I don't think he likes me. I wouldn't like me if I was him. So, but he showed up. Everything was cordial. And he says, "Well, we don't owe for reasonable uniform appearance because they have this endorsement." And I go, "Well, this is a replacement cost policy, right?" He goes, yeah, but they have that endorsement. And I'm thinking, that doesn't make sense. That conflicts.
No.
Oh man.
I want to hear the rest of the story.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
No, yeah, I think you just bumped the button to throw you off. You're good.
I didn't. I think it's just a bad connection. I'm in the wilderness here. So, anyways, I go back, and the inside adjuster said the same thing. We don't know for reasonable uniformity. This is the endorsement, and the endorsement was it was a loss payable endorsement. Had nothing to do with it. And so I called the manager who didn't, work for that. I mean, same carrier but different. And I read it to her, and she says that's not even what it says. We owe for reasonable uniformity. So I emailed it back to the adjuster, and I said, "Can you point me to the language?"
You're back.
Yay.
Partially back. Oh, my camera's doing this again. It did this last week. Or it turned off on me. Having all kinds of issues here. My camera's going off. Cody's getting kicked off.
No. I think I got it. So,
yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But anyways, so that's how they were trained. And so I don't know if it's the adjuster. I know in yours, it's a forum where it's an adjuster stepping up thinking that they know about coverage and they don't. But these two people were trained in a training class that this carrier doesn't know for reasonable uniform appearance on a replacement cost policy when that clearly conflicts with the insurance code. So is it really just adjusters not understanding or, not talking to someone else who they shouldn't be talking to that's giving them bad advice? It's actually they're being trained wrong because the field adjuster was telling me, "Oh, I just finished this class and I know they don't know if to match that." They didn't even make the shingle anymore, the color or the shingle. And he's saying, I just was trained on this endorsement, so I know they don't owe for it. And I'm thinking, okay, why would I not believe this guy? He seems to know everything, what's going on. And they were completely wrong. Yeah. So I think it's bigger than just, a little forum I don't mean a little forum, but I could see mistakes being made when, you, me, and, Chris are talking about things and we make a mistake going, "Oh, well, that does." But when you're training people incorrectly as a company, that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, hopefully my camera stops turning off. This happened last week for me too. I got to figure out all of our issues. Okay, so I'm going to show you real fast the response that there's like 50 different comments on here. And I made a point before. This was in a podcast I did with my buddy Kurt, and he's a moderator of one of these groups, not this specific one. And I was saying, you can tell how nefarious a position you're in once you have a claim just by the number of opinions that come up anytime a question is asked about coverage in an adjuster group. Like, you'll think it's a basic question, Like, is this covered in this instance? And then all of a sudden you'll have 5 different opinions and 100 different comments. You're like, oh my gosh, depending on which adjuster shows up at your door, this is apparently a complicated issue. And so this is one of the responses that came for that one right here. Let me get back to where we can see it big enough. Oh man, okay, there we go. That'll make it. And so it'll be a little bit small, but I'm going to read it for you guys, and that'll make us all big again. So this adjuster said, yeah, long-term leakage or seepage. At some point, insureds need to dig into their own pockets and suck it up. Workmanship from the last roofer, which didn't flash something. I can change my camera and just keep it here for now. Workmanship from the last roofer, which didn't flash something correctly, that allowed the leakage over a period of 14 days or more. Wear and tear to pipe jacks and lack of maintenance, which allowed water to seep in. There are so many pieces of the policy the carrier could use. You should have the insured dig into their equity and stop trying to get rot paid for.
Wow.
This is, I looked on him on here. He is a well-experienced adjuster. I'll just say, for Pilot, like the biggest independent adjusting firm that there is who this guy works for. So he could very well end up at your door if you're in the state that he's working in.
And that's completely wrong and goes against everything. What was that?
Sorry,
Rachel?
Cody.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's the same thing as just having the bundles of shingles delivered with the nails and going, all right, have a good day. Like, what good does that do you? Nothing.
Yeah.
Don't forget the ice and water, and here's your felt.
Mhm.
Bye. That's
Well,
not what the policy intended.
But they can use that. They can expand if you allow them to use that. They can expand that. You know, I've had adjusters try and say, well, we don't offer reasonable uniform appearance because that floor has wear and tear to it, and that wear and tear caused it to no longer match. What is that? I mean, so you think they wouldn't know for any reasonable uniform appearance using that logic, right? I mean, I know you're talking about.
I mean, this is what we talked about last week. Yeah.
So, I mean, they're trying to find ways to deteriorate the codes that were put in place to protect these homeowners. And that's the sad part is no one's really fighting back, right? On an individual basis, but, yeah, that's what they're trying to do. So now they don't have to replace, roofs. They just have to pay for that damaged area or give you some, like Rachel said, give some roofing shingles and some nails and some felt and, good luck. Wish you the best. See you next year.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about this last week, Cody, which is the way that, I mean, if insureds, if homeowners acquiesce to these things, and insurance companies win on these arguments that make no sense historically and how policies have been read, the implications of them across the industry are kind of insane, right? This has to do with, is char and ash damaged because it can be removed? Well, is water damaged because it can be dried out, right? Like the implications of one argument and what it leads to over the next. And this is another example of that. But one of my favorite things is just the tone of this adjuster is, again, his first sentence, yeah, long-term leakage or seepage. At some point, the insureds need to dig into their own pockets and suck it up. So not only does he think that he's right when he's like almost certainly wrong, his attitude about it is these greedy homeowners need to stop trying to take advantage of their insurance company. And he's like, no matter what, like no one's trying to take advantage of their insurance company when they're trying to get their wind damaged roof paid for. And it just kind of blew my mind, his whole tone with it. And there were a lot of people that agreed with him.
Look, the roof payment schedule, I wish every carrier would have it. That way it would cut down on the anxiety by the adjuster.
Mm-hmm. Just
write the whole thing, depreciate it accordingly, and let's call it a day. And then there's no fighting about roofs. We can fight about other stuff. There's so many other things to fight about. Because there is a certain amount of maintenance. There is a certain amount of responsibility a policyholder has to take. But that really is that's subjective. It's subjective. They think they're doing their best. The policy gets written and bound. So didn't they do their best then? It's really hard to draw the line. And there is, because in California, you guys know, there's so many carriers drawing. I mean, surely it's because of claims that were paid they shouldn't have been 5 years ago. Not even now, right? But also just the large losses, the catastrophic, the number of losses, that also aids in the carriers pulling out. But God, just make it simple so everybody gets covered. I wish they could.
Rachel, explain the roof payment schedule. I have like a poor understanding of it myself and how it would affect a claim like this. It explains how the depreciation will apply, right? Essentially.
Yeah. So basically, if your roof is 7 years old, they pay. There's no fuss about it. It cuts down on we're not going to cover the whole roof. It's easier to pay for the whole roof because they're going to depreciate it, and they're not going. It is
non-recoverable.
So it's non-recoverable. You just get it is a sliding scale based on the age of the roof, and it's given to you with the policy. It's upfront. Where you are. So if you want to switch policies at that point, when the roof is getting aged, basically it's a reminder to do maintenance too. If you're getting to that point where you're only going to get 10%, maybe time to either shop policies or maybe it's time to get the new roof. Maybe depending on or do something else to shore up your roof. Anyway, but yeah, roof payment. Yeah. I love the idea because it's upfront. That's all. It's really has nothing to do with anything else. It's upfront. It has nothing to do with building today, by the way.
Who used that roofing schedule? I mean, is that a carrier thing, right?
Yeah, State Farm and Allstate both have them. They don't use them for every policy, but I've seen them for both. I think the State Farm was a Texas policy, and I don't remember the Allstate policy.
I think that's a great idea.
Makes it easier.
Yeah, so essentially,
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah. Just to reiterate, Rachel, essentially the roof payment schedule is if your roof is older or as it ages, the insurance company is essentially saying we insure it for less as it ages. So you're more incentivized to keep your roof updated and less incentivized to file a claim for minimal damage to it as it ages. And so, which again, seems very appropriate. It's a very obvious part of the house that deteriorates, and there are carriers that would likely let you buy your way out of that endorsement, which would be fine. Pay a higher premium. The thing that we're talking about is carriers avoiding doing that extra work of putting that endorsement in there, or whatever it might be, because if you get that endorsement, then you're going to have to reduce premiums. And so instead, they go and take language that is unrelated and apply it here and try and set new standards for how policies should operate. Set and just make new rules across the industry, essentially. Real fast, Emily, one of our frequent commenters, has a quick question. Do you think adjusters can get into homeowner or Facebook groups? There's one specifically for Eaton Fire surviving structures, and I usually switch to direct messages if I get into details about things. That's a good question, Emily. So you're saying could your adjuster be spying into your Facebook group? I mean, I've tried to get into some Facebook groups, even as Tugboat as a support, and they're usually pretty careful if they're supposed to be specific to homeowners, and they'll be explicit hey, we're only for homeowners in this area. So I would say, and they'll ask for some proof oftentimes. And so I would say it's likely difficult for them to get into there unless they lived in the area, which they might. I mean, there are plenty of adjusters in California. But two, I have not met an adjuster who had that big of a passion for trying to dive into the details of a claim. Now, special investigators would be another story. I have talked to people that work special investigation unit for carriers, and those are the Barney Fifes. Those are the ones that want to dig up your life, and they'll find plenty of ways to be invasive and get information. And so, but I never worked in special investigation. I don't think anybody. Cody, did you work special investigation at all?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So, I mean, the lengths that they'll go to. This is a funny story with special investigation. I've only had a handful of experiences with them, but on a claim I was a public adjuster for, they were questioning the pack out invoice and how valid it was. And even though there was photos from throughout the pack out of it in progress, they thought there were too many boxes representing the amount of stuff that was in the house. And so they had the pack out company remove every single box from every single vault, put them out on the parking lot of the storage facility where that pack out company was located. And the special investigator had them open every single box to make sure that they had utilized the space in that box adequately and weren't overbilling and inflating their estimate to the insurance company. And we just stood there for hours while he went through, and he would question, because there'd be like a box that was half full. He'd be like, why didn't you fill this one out half the way? Like, well, it's pots and pans, and there's only a few, and we're not gonna like put dishes in there as well. And then like, he'd write something down on his clipboard and then move on to the next box.
God,
Wow.
terrible.
That's what always that shocks me about SIUs, because when SIU's involved, it's still a covered claim. They haven't proven anything. They're just investigating a suspicion. But some of them, one of my best friends is a SIU supervisor, and he's a great guy. And he used to. That's how we got to know each other. I used to do a lot of Spanish-speaking clients, and I don't speak Spanish, and he did, and I trusted him. Because he wasn't there to be vindictive. He was there to do a job, and he would interview them in Spanish right in front of me. I'd record it and get it transcribed later, but I trusted him, right? He was there to do his job. It sounds like that guy doesn't know what his job is. He's actually looking for reasons. And what if the boxes weren't full? Whose fault? You can't punish the insured for that. No. You can subrogate and go against the insured, but you still have to indemnify the insured. And I think that's what people forget. You still have to indemnify your insured, right? And take care of your insured, even in that situation.
Yep.
Anyways.
100%. Very, very much so. All right. Well, with the last few minutes, Rachel, we were going to talk a little bit about this same theme of how adjusters are viewing their role, what the ways that they're interacting. You sent me a handful of documents. I've redacted all of them. What would be the one that would be most relevant for us to spend a few minutes on before we finish up?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's not even about adjusters, really. It's about a one carrier group. That is let's see, the document is, the one.
And you can say the carrier. It's Farmers and Foremost for this one.
It's Farmers and Foremost. And so the document that I would pull up if I were you is called, I just want to pull up the page that shows that one article, the excerpt from, I can't remember what it's called. There's Farmers 3.5 maybe. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Page 5.
Okay. Yeah. I got that one right here. All right. So let me pull that one up. Take a look at that.
And really, it's just something to be aware of for everyone, because every Farmers and Foremost letter that accompanied an estimate had this excerpt from an article to support their how the estimate was written.
And explain the article real fast that you're talking about and what the context of that is.
So it says, for all intents and purposes, that ash isn't toxic. It's fine. That is a very general, but that's my takeaway from it. It's saying, you can wash the clothes, period, done, no big deal. So if you scroll down, I think it's page 5. There you go. And it says, so common household materials, the effects of ash on common household materials. What the article is, again, it supports you know, basically not testing because it's not toxic. It's meant to, I believe it's been given to policyholders so they don't escalate in their mind about the damage, right? My insurance company is taking care of me and they decided to give me this information. But what it does, it dispels that there could be anything else in the ash that could be toxic. Ash alone is not toxic, they're saying. So, which I found to be untrue, because that ash sit and char that is outside, carried by the winds, it contained lead and mercury and thallium and cyanide and all kinds of things. And so they're not acknowledging this. To me, represents Farmers and Foremost's pre-investigation. They predetermined that it's fine. Everybody's fine. We're all fine. So just here's the estimate and have a nice life. And you try to get this article. So it's cited at the bottom. This man.
So real fast, let me add a tiny bit of context here. So there's 3 different things that are relevant right now. And then Rachel, I'll have you dive back into it. There's an article that was written by an organization. I think it's referenced at the bottom there. And that article is called, sorry, let me find it there. An article written by someone named Richard Wade. He's a PhD in material damage and health impacts of wildfire smoke and for Omega Environmental Services. So writes this article, right? Mm-hmm. And then a handbook is created citing that article, essentially saying this stuff is not toxic. Therefore, here's the protocols that need to happen. All right. So, and that handbook is called Technical Guide for Wildfire Impact Assessments. Right. And so they create this handbook based off that article. Right. And so then Farmers Insurance now has deniability and can say, hey, there's a scientific article and a handbook. And then they found one restoration company that they were using across all the claims called American, because they're named in this document as well, American Disaster Recovery something, who agreed that they would go by the standards in this handbook, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're using this across all the wildfire claims where the homes are not destroyed. And so anyways, when Rachel's talking about an article, there's this article written by this PhD. That article became a handbook, and that handbook is what carriers are saying proves that this ash and soot is not toxic.
But the article itself, like this, what you're seeing on the screen is from a white paper. Mm-hmm. So me doing my, trying to be helpful to everybody, like, let's figure out what does the rest of the article say? If all we get is these few paragraphs, what does the rest of the article say? Well, you can't get the rest of the article. It's not available online. I went to the Omega Environmental Services. The article doesn't exist. I tried to view another white paper with a similar title or maybe just a little bit different, maybe not material damage, maybe it's building materials or something, it's just some other, it's related. I can't tell who it's by, and I get the same. I've done this every week for 3 months. I get the same, thanks for visiting, that, it'll be emailed to you shortly. I've never, ever gotten that article, any of the white papers. I've done like 4 of them. I'll randomly do it, and I've done 3 different email addresses. It's impossible to get this article or even any of the articles from this place. But insurance companies are leaning heavily on, Farmers and Foremost, but every insurance company is leaning on something. It's just like this. They find that something that suits their argument, and they'll die on that hill, even though you can't see what's on the other side of the hill. And it's just unfair because we're not privy to the information. We, being the policyholders, we're not privy to the rest of the story. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, that's very disingenuous in my opinion. And I think, again, Farmers and Foremost, that's really nasty. that they're doing.
Yeah, they have done a lot better in the past, and they should do better now. Cody, do you have any experience with that handbook we were just showing, or talking about, or that article?
Never even heard of it. I'm actually very interested. I want to see what you guys have. I'm
I
on
bought
my
it.
phone, so I can't read it. But yeah, send it over to me because I'm very interested in reading that and finding the complete article.
Yeah, I bought
sounds,
it. I couldn't
Sounds like
help
you bought it.
Yeah, I couldn't help
Right.
myself. I had to.
Yeah. Sounds like it was written by the same scientist who said that cigarette smoke's healthy.
Yeah.
But you know what? Here's something that we were talking about the other day. When does a wildfire stop being a wildfire and has become a structure fire? So you can talk about wildfires all you want, but I don't. First of all, with my limited knowledge, I'm not an expert on fire. I disagree. That being said, I disagree that wildfire is not toxic. A lot of the components of it are carcinogen, have carcinogenic qualities, right? But at what point is it no longer a wildfire and a structure fire? You're finding lead, asbestos, and all these other materials in there that are part of a structure fire, not a wildfire. There's even two books. We were talking about that last time, right? There's a wildfire certification, and there's a different than the structure fire.
Mhm.
Are you going to tell me that the Altadena fires or Eaton and Pacific Palisades are wildfires? I don't agree with that. So that article can say all at once about wildfires. What type of wildfire? Is it a wildfire that started burning structures? Because there's a difference, right? So that's what I want to look into. There's only usually some caveat of that saying, oh, this is based upon a fire that was up in Siberia with where just trees blew, trees and brush.
It is something that is really unique about these fires that we've been trying to help people, especially out of town adjusters, understand is how how aggressive these fires were and how vast of an area of homes that they burned is really unique. Now, there's been other instances like Paradise and things like that where this happened, but most of the time you hear wildfire, you look at the news, oh my gosh, it's huge. And then most of the time you'll hear like it burned a few structures, right? Because it's in the mountains moving through and it hits some rural structures and they're able to protect them. These fires started on the hills right next to neighborhoods and then burned through neighborhoods, right? Like they also worked their ways through the hills some, but the area that they burned were tract homes and like homes with a few feet in between them, just moving from one structure to the next structure. It's not like it was moving through all the trees and then hit a house. And so all the smoke that's coming through. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Cody. It was what you were talking about is we were discussing a claim where the fire burned into one room in a large house and then that house filled with smoke. And it's like, well, there's a wildfire outside, but this house was on fire. So this is a structure fire. And at what point do we and I thought it was a really interesting way of seeing it. It's like, why do we even call it a wildfire at this point? It's a structure fire. The structure was on fire and the smoke infiltrated the house. And so anyways, I think the way that we talk about things is important. I think I think more and more often we're going to have to think through how do we explain this in new ways because clearly whether it's a carrier or an adjuster themselves, they've decided to throw whatever the old rules were for how we understood things out the window. And so a lot of what we're doing and the frustration we're coming up against, like, well, this explanation and the argument that I've used forever is no longer working. Nobody seems to care about it on the carrier side. So we're having to find new ways to explain things. And so I thought that was a good practice in that. It's like, well, how about we just stop calling it wildfire this time? Right. And see where we get with that. And sometimes you have to approach a claim with a fresh set of eyes and some new ideas to try and get it over the next line. Cody, we utilized you. I won't go into the details of it, but we utilized your services recently for our tugboat user did to try and hey, let's change the way that they dispute something with the carrier, right? Like a different type of letter, a different type of assessment. Carriers like to use forensic engineer reports. What is a coverage analysis from an attorney mean? And so we'll see what some of these things might do. Oh, Emily's giving us some ideas. I like her phrase that she used here. She says, let's call it a unprecedented firestorm.
Oh, that was Christine Dunford, actually.
That's Christine. That's Christine Dunford. I like that, Christine.
Yeah.
Emily said we'll call it a conflagration. That's what she said. These are good. We're gonna write these ones down and we'll try them all and then see which one is most effective
Right.
with the carrier. What if you did that in your first notice of loss and like we didn't, or like when we represented to the carrier, it's not a wildfire, it's a unprecedented firestorm. Is what we call it on there. Oh, that'd be good. I like this idea. We're gonna
really,
try this.
when it comes down to it, it's not going to change the way the adjusters estimate because they don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
It's not going to do that.
Everyone, I super appreciate you. It is 4:01. We are finishing up our office hour. Aaron and I have another meeting to go to, which we usually don't have to jump off super fast. But Cody, appreciate you. Have a good time up north. How long you gone for?
I think till Sunday, right?
Oh, good. You'll be back
Sunday.
You'll be back
I'll
for
be
our
back.
next office hours then.
I will be. Thank
and
you.
We'll have you on the podcast soon and we'll do some proper videos. So anyways, thanks everyone. Appreciate everyone's
you.
comments and joining in. We'll talk.